Okay, we know a little bit about comparison operators and how to handle something that returns true and something that returns false. We know them to be if statements and else statements. But what if we want to match more than that? Well, we could do something like this. Var name is equal to Caleb. And then we could say, if name is equal to Caleb, do something in here. Okay, and what if it's not Caleb? Well, what if the name is Zephyr? Well, then we would have to do if name is equal to Zephyr. Zephyr action in here. And then we have an else statement. And what if the name is not Zephyr? What if it's also not Caleb or Zephyr? What if the name is equal to Henry action in here, else, well, what if the name is not Caleb, Zephyr, or Henry? And this goes on and on and on and on, and it just gets really gross. I mean, even looking at this right now, it sort of seems a little confusing to the naked eye. You just look at it and you go, that's a lot of nesting. And this can go on forever and ever. Luckily, there is a better way to handle this in the world of JavaScript. There's actually two ways we can do this. I'm going to show you the main way, the most common way, and then I'm going to show you another way that's a little less common, but also super useful. So what we can do is, if the name is equal to Caleb, great, console.log, awesome. Okay, we can also do else if the name is equal to Zephyr, and then we can say console.log meow. And then we can say else if name is equal to Henry, console.log little meow, because he's a little kitty. And finally, if it's not Caleb or Zephyr or Henry, console.warn not handled. Something like that. And let's go ahead and give this a refresh. And we can see it says awesome in here. Let's make that smaller. And if we change that name to Zephyr, it says meow. If we change that name to Henry, we know it's going to say little meow, because that's what we wrote, little meow. And if we change it to anyone else, let's change it to doggo. Doggo. It's not handled. And so this is how we get away from nesting if statements inside of if statements inside of if statements. We can keep them nice and flat like this. And in fact, my editor and most editors will allow you to do this because you have curly brackets in here. You can actually close them too. And so now it actually looks a lot more clean. You can actually sort of read this. If name is equal to Caleb, it's going to do something. If it's equal to Zephyr, do something. Henry, do something. Or if it's anything else, do something else. And so if you're ever looking through a lot of code and you're like, what happens if the name is Zephyr? Well, you can just open that up. Console.log meow. And so that is how we get away from nested if statements. Now in JavaScript, there is another way of doing this. And many other languages have this as well. It's called a switch statement. You don't see it too often anymore, but it is definitely a thing you can lean on whenever you have a lot of if, else, if statements. So you just say switch, and you give it a variable, whatever that is going to be, curly brackets, and then you give it a case. So the case is going to be Caleb, and then if the case is Caleb, you could say console.log, hi Caleb, and then we say break. And this is like an if statement, only instead of using curly braces, we're using a colon, and instead of this curly brace, we're using the word break. We'll actually see the word break a lot more when we get to while loops, for each loops, things like that. Then we can give it another case, any other name. We could say Nathan, console.log, hi Nathan, break. And then we could say so on and so on and so on. Or if we just wanted to catch any other scenario, we could just say default console.warn not handled and break. So let's go ahead and let's change this from name. Let's change this to family member. And let's create var family member is equal to, let's start off with Caleb, I'll be me, and it says, hi Caleb. And then if I changed it to Nathan, hi Nathan. And what if I changed it to Wade? Not handled on line 22. Look at that, not handled, line 22. So this is basically the exact same way of doing an if, else statement, Some people like this way, some people like the if-else-if way. Personally, I lean towards the if-else-if-else way. It just seems a little more explicit, and not everybody knows about the switch functionality, so it can be a little bit harder for someone who has never seen a switch statement like this before to figure out what's going on, whereas every programmer you run into will know about if, else if, and else statements. And so one thing to note here is it's going to try to match that first case and stop. So what we're saying here is if the family member is Caleb, console log, hi Caleb, and then stop. Don't do any of the other ones. Just like down here, if the name is equal to Caleb, then just execute this one, but it's not. Then it's going to try to do this one. Does it match? No. Then it's going to try to do this one. Does that match? No. Then it's going to do the else statement. And this else statement is actually optional. You don't need to have that in there. You can say if the name is Caleb or Zephyr or Henry, take an action, and if it's anything else, don't do anything at all. You could totally write that. So what I would like you to do for some hands-on experience here is write an if, else statement. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be complex. Just like something what I have here, just a bunch of console logging. That's totally okay. I just want you to get some experience with the else if syntax. And really when it comes down to the syntax, it just looks like someone grabbed an if statement, like this one up here. And in their else statement, they just pasted it in. That's all it is. So give that a shot. Don't forget to have some fun with it. And when you're done with that, let's head on over to the next lesson.